Quotes. We have talked to you and given you lots of quotes that you've seen footage of many of the more recent ones. Now, let's look at this question. We have a quote here in a box, and then the question says, which nation followed this advice and aligned with the colonies? I think it's important to go up and read the quote now. The power which first recognizes the independence of the Americas will be the one to gather all the fruits of this war. Benjamin Franklin. Wow. Let's think about Ben Franklin, time period, and war. What war are we talking about? We also see down here colonies. We know that we're talking about colonies. Now, Benjamin Franklin was around during the time of the American Revolution, and that's really the only war where we've had somebody align with the colonies. Now, you might know that Benjamin Franklin lived in France for a time and petitioned the French government to help the American colonies in their war against Great Britain. But you probably wouldn't actually know that, so let's look down at the answer choices. F. Austria. The first time that we talked about Austria during this course was with World War I and the decline of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. We also talked about Austria in World War II. We never had talked about Austria during the time of Benjamin Franklin and during the time of the American Revolution. France. Well, I just said that Benjamin Franklin had lived in France and petitioned the French government, but let's move on for a second. Russia. Now, Russia was a very large empire for quite some time, but we never talked about them during the early parts of this class. We've talked about Russia a lot in our more recent units, starting with World War I, World War II, and the Cold War, but Russia really wasn't a factor in American history before then. And finally, we have Spain as an answer choice. Spain they were a colonial power and they settled areas in Florida and Mexico and some of the American Southwest, but Spain wasn't really aligned with the U.S. During the Revolutionary War. We talked about Spain some during that time period, but not a whole lot. We've concluded that F and H, Austria and Russia, are not good answer choices, so at worst we have a 50-50 guess between France and Spain. Knowing that Ben Franklin had lived in France, we know that France is the correct answer. The best way to eliminate J as a potential correct answer would be thinking back during this time period and realizing that Spain was not a factor in the American Revolution. How did we know that we were talking about the American Revolution? Well, right here we have independence of the Americas. Well, this is a U.S. history class, so this probably wouldn't be talking about anything in Central or South America or Canada or Mexico. So it's a pretty safe assumption that we are talking about the United States and the U.S. Revolutionary War. Gather all the fruits of this war. All of the colonial powers wanted to be as rich as possible, so we can assume that somebody would help us, and you have to go back and know that France helped us. This one is one of the tougher questions to get right, but by breaking down the quote, we can go from having 4 possible answers to only 2, and then you would have to remember something about France helping us during the war, or know that Ben Franklin had lived in France and petitioned the French government to help out the American colonies in order to get this question right.